producer. I'm a musician. I used to have a podcast on an app called Spearman,
Ah.
but they started to wind down their audio podcasting and are going into video instead.
Ah.
And so I moved over to this platform, and,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to be I interview indie artists, like actual bands. So on my
Oh,
Spearman,
sweet.
I've interviewed like bands like this band from the Bermuda called Heritage, and
Nice.
they just did a cover of a Drake song, and I have an episode where I talk about it on my blogger. Um, and I've interviewed like a Canadian artist named Rain, Kendra Erica, so she's like a Billboard dance pop star, and
Sick,
DJ Luna, who's like a Swedish DJ.
man.
Just
Aw.
a bunch of cool stuff, and I produce records, and I'm working on a record, and I do a lot of kind of like old school analog synth stuff because I'm kind of an 80s guy. So I mean, I've got
Yeah.
like Moogs and Rolands, and I don't use what they call the digital audio workstation. I use sequencers and tape loopers and analogs, the actual real synthesizers, which is kind of
Right.
like a lost art to some people. But there's actually a movement in Europe,
Resurgence.
yeah, where a lot of these synthesizers are coming back. The company Moog, which created, the synthesizers that like people might not really, recognize that they like Moog, but if you listen to the Chronic, that is a Moog Model D synthesizer
Oh.
that makes most of those sounds, and most of those sounds were also done by P-Funk Funkadelic using Moogs. So most of the early hip hop is actually based on Funkadelic, and they used Moog synthesizers. So
Wow.
those are analog synths that make that sound, and everybody who's grooving to that stuff, synthesizers aren't just Duran Duran and Flock of Seagulls and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They're used in hip hop. They're heavy bass lines. They're created by these synthesizers, and so I'm kind of a synth guru. I'm kind of like a big proponent of people like learning how to get a synthesizer and using it, but to make music, because you can do a lot of your own grooves. You don't have to
Right.
you can create your own stuff.
Yeah, and that's like the biggest part of it, isn't it? The aspect of, well, like being able to create it on your own. I mean, the opportunities and as well, like just the capabilities that we have now in some ways to like go ahead and learn this. And some people don't know that they can do it themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
well, there's so much. I mean, like, not putting down the DAW. I mean, if you live in an apartment and you don't have access to, enough room to have a synthesizer, then having like an Apple or a Surface, and then loading Pro Tools or Ableton Live or any of those programs, or like Fruity Loops or any like FL Studio, you can take somebody that has no musical training, and they can get on the laptop, and once they figure out how to layer and how to use the soft synths, you can create beats and grooves, and you can do it. And there's nothing wrong with that, because the Bomb Squad for Public Enemy, they use massive amounts of tape loops to create that sound. It takes a million, but what they did was really creative. They didn't do like a Vanilla Ice, Ice Ice Baby, and like steal like David Bowie and
somebody else's song. Yeah.
and then say that's a new song. They actually have very deep reference points, and pulling, they pulled like noise, ambient noise, like
Yeah.
really, they pulled like jazz records that were not well known, or old R&B records that weren't well known, and because that takes a level of creativity that when you sample like that, then you actually create something that's new,
Yeah, agreed. Because there's that fine line between, just kind of of where it is definitely and obviously somebody else's song, and you're just kind of like inserting yourself,
Yeah,
as opposed to actually, creating something that is definitely new. Like the idea of like taking like the level of creativity and respect I have for those that like are able to kind of just hear something and then just mix, like, to take ambient noise and mix it and give it like some kind of that tune, or like mix it into some kind of beat. That's like a different kind of mind, just all in and of itself.
Yeah, it's
And,
just cool. Like the equipment today, there are samplers that let you
mm-hmm,
like record something, right? So you can take it straight and it's okay, I've got the exact copy. But then they let you splice it and slow it down and invert it and turn it around. So I have this sampler from this company called Make Noise, this American company, and they make this module that lets you capture like a sample, but when you take it, it can rip it apart in multiple ways. It can take
huh,
a vocal from the center of the recording and then
mm-hmm,
a vocal from the end of the recording and then make them happen at the same time. It can actually
nice.
do time warping. It can do inverting
Interesting.
and reversing. So what I've done is I sample my own material and then you
Mm-hmm,
go back and like rip it apart and slow it down. Let's just say I had something at 160 beats per minute, that I drop it down to 40, and then I'll go and invert it, and I do all these things, and it's not recognizable. It doesn't even sound like the same thing, and it ends up giving you what you call like a sound source. And in synth
mm-hmm,
kind of tech, it's like an oscillator. And the synthesizers, the sound source in a synthesizer is called an oscillator. And when you turn a sample to become an oscillator, then that sound can actually be used for the whole length of the keyboard. And so that becomes like a tone. And so that sample can become like a piano or become like a tone that's on a DX7 or a Yamaha or a Chord Kronos or any of these synthesizers. Once you take that sample and you turn it into a tone, oscillating tone, you can actually utilize it in chords, you can utilize it in melodies, and that actually gives you a lot of capability to do a lot of stuff that's not typical. And that's the main thing in
right.
music. What you want to do is find a new way to do something.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
And a lot
Or
of it is like merging genres. You take jazz, you mix it with hip hop. You take rock and you put it into hip hop. You take multiple genres and you kind of cross pollinate.
yeah, and you create your own gem.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Get
really
it all polished up and everything, refine it. And that's what's so it's so cool to be able to, you know, have you ever just had that moment where you like did, well, you probably have, where you've spliced something enough and come back to it and you're just like, whoa, that sounded so cool. That sounded so different. I really like that sound.
yeah. So what I do is I use what called digital recorders from a Japanese company called Zoom, and basically it's like using a tape machine because I used to use Tascam 4